Welcome back to Wisdom Unveiled. Today, we're doing another deep dive into the incredible poetry of Hafez Shirazi.
That's right. We're going to be looking at one specific ghazal and exploring some really fascinating interpretations.
These interpretations come from conversations between the Iranian philosophers Dr. Dinani and Dr. Larijani from their Marifat series.
Yes, and it's important to mention up front, as we always do, this is based on our understanding of translations.
Exactly. We're trying our best to convey their thoughts accurately, but, translation always has its challenges. Some nuances might get lost.
Absolutely. So apologies in advance for any small discrepancies. We really do welcome feedback if something doesn't sound quite right.
Definitely. So this specific discussion we're drawing from happened around Eid Maba.
Right, the anniversary of the Prophet Muhammad's first revelation. And that timing, that context, is actually pretty crucial for their reading of this particular poem.
It really shapes their perspective, doesn't it? Because they offer this, quite compelling idea about the opening lines.
They do. They suggest that the beloved, the Yar Hafez writes about, isn't necessarily the romantic figure we often assume.
Which is, let's be honest, the default reading for a lot of Hafez.
It often is, yeah. But here they propose that Hafez is actually referring to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
And that single shift, thinking of the Prophet as the beloved, potentially reframes the entire ghazal. It's a powerful lens.
It completely changes the potential meaning. So maybe we should start by reading those opening lines.
Good idea. Let's hear them.
Okay, first line. A star shone and became the moon of the assembly. Our distressed heart became intimate and companion.
Then, my beloved who went not to school and did not write became a teacher of problems through coquetry.
And in goodness, temperament, and faithfulness, no one reaches our beloved. For you in this speech, denial is not our task.
Also, although beauty sellers have come forth in display, no one reaches our beloved in goodness and charm.
By the truth of our long companionship, no confidant of secrets reaches our single-minded, appreciative beloved.
And finally, 1,000 designs emerge from the pen of creation, yet not one reaches the heart-pleasing design of our beloved.
So hearing those, you can immediately see why someone might think romance.
Oh, absolutely. The language feels very much like love, poetry, longing, companionship, beauty, charm.
It fits that mold perfectly. But Dr. Dinani and Dr. Larijani are asking us to look a bit deeper, maybe, beyond just the surface.
Right, to see the potential spiritual allegory with the prophet as this central figure, this beloved. So what parts of these lines specifically lead them down that path?
Well, they zoom in on a few key phrases. Let's take that line. In goodness, temperament, and faithfulness, no one reaches our beloved.
Okay.
There's a really important distinction in the original Persian here between two words, Khulq and Khalq. They sound similar but mean quite different things.
Khulq and Haq. Okay, tell us about that. Why is that difference so significant?
So Khulq, that's spelled with a ka, ha, lam, kaf, refers to the outward form, the physical creation. Our bodies, how we're made.
Our physical makeup, the structure.
Exactly. You know, the Quranic idea of humans being created in the best of molds? Yes, Ani Takwim. That relates to Khulq, the sort of physical perfection.
Got it. So what about Welfq?
Ikil. This one has a Dhamma vowel.
Okay.
On the Kal is about the inner world. It's our disposition, our moral character, our ethics, the inside stuff.
Ah, so the character, the moral qualities, not just how we look, but who we are.
Precisely. It's the malaki nafsani, the spiritual qualities. And crucially, unlike our physical form, which is, given, Hilki is something that's developed.
Cultivated, you mean, through effort.
Yes, through effort, choices, practice. And from their perspective, also through divine grace, through blessing. It's not static. It's something we build.
Okay, so when Hafez talks about good temperament, a Khulq, he's pointing to this cultivated inner excellence.
That's the idea. And this Hasan Khulq isn't just one thing. It covers a whole range of virtues.
Like what?
Things like love, mercy, kindness, justice, fairness, and really importantly for this line, wafa, faithfulness.
Right. Now that's interesting because he lists goodness, temperament, and faithfulness. If faithfulness, wafa, is already part of good temperament, Hasan Khulq, why mention it separately? Seems like he's putting extra weight on it.
That's exactly what Dr. Dinani and Dr. Larijani argue. They think Hafez singles out wafa specifically for emphasis. It's part of the package, yes, but its importance, especially when thinking about the prophet, is so immense that it warrants its own mention.
So it highlights this supreme faithfulness to God, the mission, humanity.
Yes, and this ties directly into the next part of that line. For you in this speech, denial is not our task. That sounds quite definitive.
It does, almost like a challenge. Why would denial be off the table? How do they interpret that?
They read it as a very strong assertion. Basically, the prophet's moral character and faithfulness are so supremely evident, so undeniable, that rejecting it would be, well, unreasonable. It's almost self-evident.
And what's the grounding for that certainty? Why is it considered undeniable?
It comes back to the prophet's status in his life. To deny his moral perfection, they argue, you'd have to ignore the testimony of previous prophets and contradict his title as Khatam an-Nabiyyin, the seal of the prophets.
The seal. We often just hear last prophet, but seal implies more, doesn't it? Like sealing a letter.
Exactly. It signifies finality, yes, but also completion, perfection, authenticity. Like a seal authenticates a document. The prophet, as the Khatam, represents the final, perfect, authoritative culmination of prophecy.
The ultimate expression. And how does this relate to his character being undeniable?
Because, they argue, his entire life exemplified this perfection. They emphasize the consistency from birth to death. There's no record of him faltering morally, no hypocrisy, no major failing. His life was the proof.
And to illustrate this, Hasan Khulq, this amazing character, they share that story about the Jewish woman, right?
Yes, that's a classic example they use. It really demonstrates his forbearance. This woman apparently used to throw rubbish at him every single day as he walked past her house.
Every day. Wow.
Yes, just out of spite. But then one day, she didn't. The rubbish didn't come.
And he noticed her absence?
He did. And instead of just being glad or ignoring it, he actually asked what had happened to her.
And found out she was sick.
Right. And then he went to visit her. Despite everything she'd done, he showed compassion and concern.
That's quite something. It really shows extraordinary kindness.
It does. And the philosophers highlight this as a perfect example of his Hasan Khulq in action. It wasn't just theory, it was how he lived. And they contrast this with the time he lived in the Jahiliyyah.
The age of ignorance, which, as they clarify, wasn't just about people not being able to read.
No, not primarily. Jahiliyyah refers more to a state of deep moral and social darkness, tribalism, endless feuds, injustice, deceit. Ethical norms had really broken down. It was a very harsh reality.
So the prophet's character, his Hosq, stood in stark contrast to that.
Completely. And they argue that it was this very character, his lived example of mercy and integrity, that managed to penetrate that harshness. It drew people in, even enemies. It was transformative.
So that line about goodness, temperament, and faithfulness becomes a direct reference to that transformative power. Okay, let's move to the next line they analyze. Although beauty sellers have come forth in display, no one reaches our beloved in goodness and charm. They dig into goodness and charm here, using the terms Hasan and Malahat.
Yes, another subtle but important distinction. Hasan, they connect to Mazun Budan, being proportionate, harmonious, perfectly balanced, like objective structural beauty.
Like perfect symmetry, perfect form.
Right. Then there's Malahat. This is more like charm, grace, allure. It's a captivating quality that goes beyond just perfect proportions, sometimes translated as saltiness, namakdar budan, implying a kind of irresistible flavor or appeal.
So you could have Hasan, perfect features, but lack Malahat, that captivating spark.
Exactly. Or perhaps vice versa, though less common in this context. The point here is that the prophet, in their interpretation, possessed both to an unparalleled degree. Perfect inner and outer goodness, Hasan, combined with this irresistible charm and appeal, Malahat.
And this combination is what allowed him to, as they put it, sort of seize the world with his beauty and charm.
That's the idea. It wasn't just the message, but the person embodying it so perfectly.
Okay. Then there's the line. By the truth of our long companionship, no confidant of secrets reaches our single-minded, appreciative beloved. The term yakjahata, single-minded, could sound a bit simple or limited.
It could, if you take it literally. But Dr. Dinani and Dr. Larijani see yakjahata, meaning of one direction, very differently. Not as limitation, but as ultimate focus.
Focused on what?
Focused entirely on the wash al-haq, the face of God, the truth, the divine reality. It signifies an absolute, unwavering orientation towards God.
Ah, so it's about undivided devotion, not narrowness.
Precisely. They link it to the Quranic idea. Wherever you turn, there's the face of Allah. The prophet, in this view, is the ultimate monotheist, completely directed towards the one. It even connects to deeper mystical ideas like the Hakikat Muhammadiyya, Muhammadan reality, as this kind of unifying spiritual principle.
That adds incredible depth. Okay, last one from the opening. 1,000 designs emerge from the pen of creation, yet not one reaches the heart-pleasing design of our beloved. How do they read pen of creation and design of our beloved?
The design of our beloved, the Nashiar, is again seen as the prophet, specifically his inner reality, his hitchq.
His perfected character.
Yes. And the pen of creation, Kalami Sun, represents all of God's creation, the Sanadi Hak, the way God creates, the entire universe with all its wonders.
All the beauty in nature, everything made.
Everything. And the verse is saying, look, creation is filled with countless amazing, beautiful designs, 1,000 designs. But none of them, not one, quite reaches the heart-pleasing perfection of the prophet's inner design, his hitchq.
So his inner spiritual and moral reality is presented as the pinnacle of God's creation.
That's the interpretation. It suggests that while the physical world, Khulq, is beautiful but transient, the perfected inner character, Hashku, possesses an enduring, supreme beauty. And this again circles back to the importance of cultivating Hasan Khulq ourselves, using the prophet as the ultimate model.
Wow. Just looking at these opening lines through that specific lens, interpreting the beloved as the prophet, it really unlocks so much depth in Hafez's words. It moves way beyond just a simple love poem.
It really does. It opens up huge spiritual and ethical dimensions. And this emphasis on the inner character, the hapyu, as something we actively work on, potentially with divine help, feels very relevant, doesn't it? It's a practical takeaway.
Absolutely. And as you said, this is just scratching the surface of this ghazal. Dr. Dinani and Dr. Larijani went on to discuss Hasan Khulq and other noble virtues, maqam-e, in much more detail based on this poem.
Indeed. It really invites us, doesn't it, to maybe reread Hafez or other poets with this kind of lens in mind, to look for those deeper layers.
Definitely. And maybe reflect on those qualities discussed: faithfulness, forbearance, beauty balanced with charm, single-minded devotion. Which of those resonate? How can we, try to cultivate them in our own small ways?
It's a continuous journey, isn't it, of learning and reflecting. What I find really fascinating is how this interpretation highlights the way spirituality can be woven into seemingly secular art forms, like love poetry.
Right, seeing the potential for allegory, especially given the cultural context.
Exactly. It suggests that wisdom can be found in these beautiful expressions if we approach them with an open mind and an understanding of the tradition they come from.
It's a reminder that poetry can be so much more than just nice words. It can be a conduit for deep ethical and spiritual insight.
And the level of detailed analysis that scholars like Dr. Dinani and Dr. Larijani bring to Hafez just shows how rich and relevant these texts remain.
It really does. Thank you so much for walking us through these interpretations today. It's given me a lot to think about.
My pleasure. It's always fascinating to explore these connections between poetry, philosophy, and spirituality.
And thank you all for joining us for this deep dive on Wisdom Unveiled. We hope you'll join us again next time.